People who argue that women cannot be preachers or pastors do so for misogynistic reasons.
So this is simply not true.
All right, let's see it.
One is not a misandrist because he doesn't think that a man can be a surrogate mother or a wet nurse or egg donor.
So this is a wildly false analogy for at least two reasons. To begin, misandry and misogyny are not remotely on the same level. There is absolutely no parity there because we live in a society where men overwhelmingly are privileged over and against women. Men do not face remotely as many systemic power asymmetries as do women. So these are not two things on the same playing field, so they are not analogous to each other. But additionally, this creator mentioned three roles, the essential defining duties of which are prototypically and almost unilaterally performed by people with female bodies. The same is absolutely not true of the role of pastor. There is no duty that is performed by a pastor that requires a male body and that cannot be done with a female body. So again, wildly false analogy.
An employer is not a misogynist because he doesn't hire a woman to be a lumberjack or deep sea welder or bricklayer or construction worker or a firefighter.
If a woman who is applying to the job is capable of performing the duties required by the job, then yes, it's the very essence of misogyny to not hire that woman for no other reason than that she is a woman.
That employer might just think that this woman cannot handle the physical rigor of that particular job.
And it would be against the law for an employer to say, you've told me you can perform the duties required by this job, but I don't think you can because you're a woman. That is rank misogyny. And again, a false analogy, because there is no duty that is performed by a pastor that requires a male body to perform.
Sometimes my 4-year-old son says, Mommy, I don't want you, I want daddy. I don't assume that my 4-year-old son is a misogynist, he just wants daddy.
An utterly irrelevant statement that has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on whether or not women can be pastors.
You see, in certain cultures, you have certain roles for women and men. In Swedish culture, my culture, as any other culture, there are just things that men can't do, and there are things that women can't do. But many of those things have absolutely nothing to do with misogyny. So we probably shouldn't just throw words around and say that everyone are now misogynistic for holding to a religious or cultural belief.
Unless that religious or cultural belief happens to be misogynist, which in this case it is.
I mean, if we want to throw words around, we can say that it's xenophobic to call a culture misogynistic when it is not. Or why not Islamophobic or Christianophobic? Or why not even racist?
But this argument begs the question because your entire premise requires we presuppose that the culture or the belief is not misogynist. But all you've done so far is pull up false analogies and demonstrate that you don't really know what it means for something to be misogynist.
Let me give you 4 facts of the text that upon consideration will demonstrate that people who argue that women cannot be preachers or pastors do so for misogynistic reasons. Data point number 1. Preacher and pastor is not an official office anywhere in the Bible. In the Hebrew Bible, we have priests, we have other cultic functionaries, we have prophets, we have a variety of things. We don't have any preachers or pastors. In the New Testament, we don't have any preachers or pastors either. We have deacons and overseers and apostles and co-workers in Christ and heads of house churches and elders, but we don't have any preachers or pastors. Preacher and pastor is not an office anywhere in the Bible.
So that's correct. Pastors as well as choir directors or youth leaders are not offices in the Bible, although some churches have them today. And it can be quite tricky actually to know how the church was structured in the New Testament. The apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors and teachers are said to be gifts in Ephesians 4. Then you have bishops, episkopos, you have presbyteros, priests, also known as presbyters or elders, and you have deacons. But these terms were somewhat fluid. Sometimes a term would be used as a title for an office and sometimes not. Paul even described himself as a diakonos. So, a lot of people who say that a woman can't be a pastor don't even know how the church was structured. And so to say then that a person is a misogynist when he or she doesn't even know is not okay.
Promoting misogyny out of ignorance is still promoting misogyny.
Anybody who wants to make an argument today on biblical grounds about who can and cannot be a preacher or a pastor has to do so by making an argument from analogy and appropriating other biblical passages in support of their position. Other biblical passages being passages that don't specifically speak about preachers and pastors, but sound sort of similar to them. That's the only way to make this argument. Other passages. That's data point number one. Those are all facts of the text. Data point number two. There are passages in the Bible that are very easy to appropriate in support of the position that women cannot be preachers or pastors. Those passages exist. I wish they didn't exist, but they exist.
Correct.
Data point number three. There are passages in the Bible which are very easy to appropriate in support of the position that women can be preachers and pastors.
Correct.
Those passages exist, and I'm glad that they do. Data point number four. Because there are passages that can be used in support of both of these positions, coming down on either side of this issue is not a result of the Bible itself. The Bible cannot arbitrate this issue. Rather, people come down on either side of this issue for extra biblical reasons.
Correct.
They have other theological commitments. They've made other interpretive choices that they're trying to be consistent with. Some other element of their worldview determines which passages they appropriate in support of which position. Those are four facts of the text, four data points. And as a result, anybody who comes down on the side that women cannot be preachers or pastors is doing so for extra biblical reasons, and those extra biblical reasons are misogynistic.
No, they can be, but they don't have to be.
No, they always will be misogynist.
My criticism of the position that women cannot be preachers or pastors, complementarianism, or however else you want to frame it, my criticism of that position has never been that it's not a biblical position. It is a biblical position in the barest sense of the term. There are lots of things that are biblical positions that are awful. The support of slavery is a biblical position. The
Correct.
support of genocide is a biblical position.
Correct.
The support of the divinely sanctioned sexual assault of innocent women because of the sins of men is a biblical position.
Again, correct.
My criticism has never been that this is an unbiblical position. My criticism is that it's evil. Full stop.
So this is where Aaron takes it a bit too far. A person is not evil just because he or she prefers a male pastor.
I think this is equivocating a bit because Aaron has not been talking just about people who prefer male pastors. Whether or not they're being misogynist is a completely separate discussion. Aaron has been talking about people who insist that women cannot be pastors and how the rationalizations for that, the arguments for that, always come from a place of misogyny, and so that is always a misogynist position to take. That, I think, is supported by the data. That, I think, given the untold suffering that has resulted from the systemic power asymmetries that impede the progress of women, is immoral and, yes, can be characterized as evil. And that is an argument that has yet to be adequately addressed. And the fit for this video has been venom.